This is LRBT2 role or method statement question, number 6. So first we see that this is a method statement because it's asking us what is the role played by a claim. And the claim is that non-marine reptiles have scales. So let's go ahead and just kind of highlight that piece really quick before we even get into it. So let's figure this out, shall we? So we have two groups of biologists to start. We have a group that is interested in our marine reptiles, and then we have another group that is interested in non-marine reptiles and bats. So this is going to be interesting. So our author agrees with the second group of biologists. Our second group, or the other biologists, there's some biologists and others. Our other biologists think that some biologists are wrong. They reject what some biologists have to say. And their reasoning is that bats don't have scales, and non-marine reptiles also have scales. So the issue here is that some biologists think that our marine reptiles, were the ones that first were able to fly because feathers came from their scales. And so it seems like, other biologists are like, okay, well, these other things have scales. So why did they not turn into flying creatures? And so or maybe it's the fact that these ones are in the ocean. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm a little confused as to why ocean reptiles are going to suddenly fly, but whatever. And then there's like bats. I don't know what bats have to do with anything. Probably that they fly, but they don't have scales whatsoever. And so the whole scales thing is what's at issue. But we've got this piece of information here. Non-marine reptiles also have scales. So they're using this, like this is evidence trying to disprove what some biologists think. So that's one piece. We read on. And then they say that those who believe that flight first developed in tree-dwelling reptiles, we've got some other group of those who believe this other thing, they reject the claim that the limbs of land-dwelling reptiles might have developed into wings. So now we're talking about a whole separate thing. There are some biologists who believe marine reptiles got feathers. There's other biologists who do not think that because they look at non-marine reptiles. And then we have this third group of people that reject the claim about limbs of land-dwelling reptiles developing into wings. So we can guess like um, non non-marine reptiles, that second group that makes a claim about non-marine reptiles. Some of them might fall into this third category of those who believe blah 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 land-dwelling reptiles. And if they do, they reject the claim and they insist it's more likely that tree-dwelling reptiles develop wings to assist their leaps from branch to branch. So, okay, cool. That's what they're talking about instead. So our other biologist, the second group, mentions non-marine reptiles, which include tree-dwelling reptiles, perhaps. Are saying these things have scales. Very unlikely that the scales would have turned into feathers. We actually think that they developed wings to get from branch to branch. So we want to try not to think about it too hard. And so one of the pitfalls with this question is really digging in and getting overwhelmed by stuff that really doesn't really relate to each other. This is not a stellar argument, but they do tell us where to focus. They tell us to focus in on the non-marine reptiles also have scales. And so if we had just kind of read the first sentence and read the second sentence, we already had it figured out at that point. The non-marine reptiles having scales, that claim is some evidence. So that's a fact, or it's given as a fact. They've pointed something out. And so that fact, what does the fact do? It's here to help combat what the other biology or help combat the claim from some biologists. It's supporting what other biologists have to say. So we're going to look for something along those lines. So A, it is cited as evidence against the claim that capacity for flight first developed in marine reptiles. So that's the claim from some biologists first. So cited as evidence, pointing out, that's pretty much what we're looking for here. Oh, well, that's not my stamp. Here it is. Cha-ching. B, it is cited as evidence against the claim that the capacity for first developed in land-dwelling animals. So it is cited against evidence against something, but not against the land-dwelling animals. We have to remember, like this other group of biologists and those who believe, they might actually have some people in common. So they're not necessarily trying to argue that. C, it is cited as evidence against the claim, so that's right so far, that the capacity for fight first developed in tree-dwelling reptiles. This is tricky because capacity for fight first developed. The only claim about first developing is about marine reptiles, not the tree-dwelling reptiles. The tree-dwelling reptiles, oh my goodness, reptiles come much later. So we're not going to actually focus in on that one. D, it weakens the claim that tree-dwelling reptiles were the first kind of reptile to develop capacity for fight. So this is no, it's just not that. We are not trying to weaken that claim. Again, our other biologists might actually be in agreement with those who believe. It's not a given, but they might actually overlap some. E, it corroborates the observation that some mammals without scales, such as bats, developed the capacity to fly. Well, so this one, this is probably the closest wrong answer in that, it does talk about bats, which is something that does occur in that sentence, but they're not trying to corroborate that observation. It's just the bats having no scales is an observation. Um, and non-marine reptiles also have scales. That doesn't relate to bats. These are both independently pieces of evidence that our other biologists are giving to disprove what some biologists have to say. So we would go with A as our answer here.